The narrative for the Bitcoin reserve is not just in the US, it's global now. You have Brazil planning to use 5% of its reserves to buy Bitcoin. El Salvador is doing quite well. You have Argentina also doing the same. So, and then companies are having it as a treasury. So it's now a sort of a land grab moment for crypto. So if, in a way, if US does not work on this, everyone grabs the narrative for the Bitcoin reserves, then it will really be too late. So the train is now here. Now it's just to see how to capture this opportunity.
Yeah, and I think one of the easiest ways to capture it at the moment is just to buy Bitcoin, because if this happens, right now we're like, oh wow, 95. When are we going to hit 100? I think it's hard to calculate how high the price will go and how fast if globally governments say that we're going to start holding 5% of our reserves in Bitcoin. Like, if you do not own Bitcoin at that time, you are going to be crying your eyes out. So
yes. I really hope as well. I hope this message goes out.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to Coinversations. This is episode 6 of Coinversations, and I do want to take a minute, first of all, to thank everybody who has been watching so far. I'm quite pleased with the number of views that we've had on our videos. We are also available on Spotify, so you can search for us there or take a look at the link in the show notes. I do want to ask, however, if I could please kindly request that you give us a like and a subscribe. In these early days of this podcast, that is going to help us so much in making sure that we're able to get this message out there to more people. And especially that since we are sponsored, which helps cover our editing costs, it really, really helps us drive more engagement. If you're enjoying these episodes, if you're enjoying the conversations, it would mean so much to me if you would take a moment to give us a like and a subscribe wherever you're viewing this, and a comment as well if you want to be really, really helpful. For those of you that are just tuning in maybe for the first time, my name is Lawrence Linker. I am an investor, an entrepreneur in the crypto space for about 4 years. When I first joined crypto, I had a lot of learning to do. And what I found was that I learned best just by talking to people that I had access to that were really smart and had areas of expertise that they could share their wisdom in. I'm a prolific networker, and I was very lucky and fortunate to be able to get in front of some really smart people and have great conversations. And the Coinversations podcast is my attempt to invite you into some of these conversations. Today, I'm really excited to be speaking to Anson Zeall. Anson is a crypto entrepreneur who is quite the OG. He really started back in like 2014, 2015 with crypto. But I think the work that he's done that I want to talk about today is his work in the regulatory space. So Anson is the founder of Access Singapore, which is a industry advocacy group for the crypto industry in Singapore. He's also the founder of IDAXA, which is an international group comprised of similar groups in other countries. So Anson is really a big deal in the space of crypto advocacy, and he's really has his finger on the pulse of what the regulators are doing globally. He's a true gem for us to have right here in Singapore. He's not a super loud guy, so he's someone that frankly I think a lot of people could easily miss. But those people in the know certainly know who Anson is and have a lot of respect for him. But I want to help, more people kind of get exposed to the work that he's doing and the wisdom that he has to share. As always, nothing said in this conversation is to be taken as financial advice, and you need to do your own research before making any financial decisions. Without further ado, here's the conversation with Anson Zeall. Anson, how are you?
Good, thanks. Thank you. Thanks for having me here.
Great to have you with us. So, Anson, why don't we start with doing a little bit of background? Tell me about when did you first discover crypto?
I love going down memory lane. It sounds cliche when I say this, but it's actually true. It was in 2013 when I was really at home. I think there was a whole clan on World of Warcraft. I was actually playing World of Warcraft, and there's some dude inside that I've been playing for ages was like, "Hey, uh, my name in the World of Warcraft. Have you heard about Bitcoin?" I said no, and at that time, at that particular moment, I just finished buying virtual currency from World of Warcraft to buy more swords and all that stuff. So I thought, is it another thing that's just like the WoW gold inside, they can print and all that? So no, go and read the paper. So all right, well, who wrote the paper? Oh, so this Japanese dude called Satoshi Nakamoto. So I actually went and read the paper. I understood the concept a bit because I mean my background is in tech. So I okay, and then I was like, what's next? I asked the guy. So go to local Bitcoin and buy Bitcoin. I was in Hong Kong at that time.
Mm.
So the guy there, there was a person there was willing to accept cash, and I was going to the Mongkok MTR in Hong Kong to uh, to get the Bitcoin in exchange for cash. And I told myself on that day, if the guy steals my phone, and most I'll lose is my phone and the cash. So on the day I gave him the phone, and I think he copied the address or something, and then it appeared on my phone. Back then, I think they were already using QR code. I wasn't even quite sure about the QR code scanner yet.
Mm.
So it then appeared on my phone in the local Bitcoin. And then, okay, I have this. So what do? I went back to the guy in World of Warcraft, and they asked me to open blockchain.info. Once I opened it, he showed me, said, "That's your Bitcoin." I'm like, wow, this is amazing. It's
Mm.
it's private yet transparent at the same time, just as what the paper was saying.
Mhm.
So that was the beginning for me because I was also managing a family fund and also experienced the whole financial crisis in 2008, 2009. So I got sold on the narrative when Bitcoin says they only have 21 million Bitcoin, and this is it. And then that's how I started my journey in crypto in 2013.
How much did you buy in that first transaction? Will you tell us?
I bought 10 back then, but the problem
Mm.
was that the hodl narrative wasn't really there yet.
Yep.
So some of the Bitcoin, I actually converted it to fund my startup, which now in hindsight, whatever it is should have just sat there
Yep.
rather than
Yep.
convert it back. But yeah, so it was back 10 back then, but the experiences in the crypto space uh took a lot away from that, converted a lot to become the startup back then.
Maybe just a fair warning for the audience. I think that there's a lot of people who got into crypto early that would be a lot wealthier today if we had held. I'm in that category.
Totally.
Um, I didn't cash out, but I did trade, and my attempts at active trading depleted my supply quite significantly. So yeah, maybe a bit of a lesson going forward. I think there's a temptation. Well, first of all, to sell when you're profitable, and which I guess could be okay as well, but certainly also to trade. And yeah, there's a cost for
Yes.
if you get it wrong for these activities. So many people who got in early have this story, almost 100%, to be honest with you. Okay, so you bought your first Bitcoin in 2013. You caught a little bit of the bug. You said this is really interesting. At what point did you think to yourself, this is something I need to really take seriously on a professional level?
Yes. So that was in January 2014 when I first started my startup called CoinPip. Recently, so I think my ex co-founder checked CoinPip. It's like an education site now, like because we uh, didn't keep the domain name. Back then, it was at the very beginning was a blockchain, a Bitcoin point of sales.
Hmm.
So that was in January 2014. Found my founders around that time, and then built up the point of sales and had some so-called Bitcoin parties in Singapore. We also had the very first one ever in Hong Kong back in 2014 as well. That's when I met the whole initial crew, including Arthur Hayes back then as well.
We just
Obviously.
had Arthur on the podcast this week, so his episode will come out right before yours.
Oh, nice, nice, nice. So yeah, so I think I took it too seriously and thought that this would be a very great product. Obviously, now looking back hindsight, I think I was 10 years too early in terms of
Mm.
crypto payments. And then I got accepted into 500 startups. So we flew over to the Valley in October 2014. So it's always right place at the right time. Back then, 500 startups was really just looking for crypto and Bitcoin founders all over the world. And we were the first Singapore Bitcoin company to go over there into their accelerator. And then from then on, I uh, obviously through the accelerator, they would then have mentors that go through your product and basically told me and my co-founder that I think we need to redo the whole thing. And I'm like, okay, we have a few months to do it before we meet the VCs. So then, long story short, we then recoded the whole product within the 3 months, and we created a blockchain remittance instead. This was before the days of the license. So we were using all the different exchanges as off-ramps back then. So we had agreements with different exchanges.
Who were the exchanges that were around at that time?
So we do back then we used including the likes of Luno, all the on ground exchanges like basically last mile exchanges.
CoinHako.
Konohako as well back then, Indodax and all of them. Obviously, when the license regime started coming out, then basically everything was stopped. But back then we were experimenting with them. So then they did help us do all the last mile off ramps to our different customers. It was going on quite well, especially we were able to, liquidity wasn't that high. So there were a lot of arbitrage opportunities back then. Yeah. So that was mostly how we earned our revenue. And yeah, expanded quite a bit until the licensing regime started coming out in 2019.
Mm. Okay, so I have a feeling this is going to lead directly into what I really want to talk to you about. Before we get into that, though, I want to take a little break to hear from our sponsor. Ready for a real bank alternative using crypto rails? Meet Cast, the ultimate card to spend stablecoins and soon crypto at over 150 million merchants. Available to over 100 countries, it takes just 3 minutes to set up. Top up using USDT, USDC, or USDE from supported networks like Solana, Tron, Ethereum, Polygon, and more. Start spending instantly using Apple or Google Pay. Splitting a bill? Send money through WhatsApp or Telegram. Need to get paid? Get a virtual USD account and receive funds in your Cast account as USD stablecoins. Cast is the first true bank alternative for the globally mobile crypto economy and remote workers. Premium metal cards or Solana cards earn up to 12% in points, and Coinversations listeners get $10 in USDT for your next coffee on Cast. Just download the app using the link in the show notes. Okay, Anson, so you were just telling us about the licensing regime that started showing up in 2019. And Anson, you're one of these guys that, frankly, that I love speaking to, and I'm so happy to have a podcast to be able to show these conversations to more people because you've been around crypto for a while, and I think for me now, at 4 years, going into my fifth year of crypto, I am really starting to realize how irreplaceable the term of experience is. There's so many people in crypto that have been in it for a year or two, and many of these people are, incredibly bright and have the ability to learn a lot very fast. But I think in many industries, and maybe in crypto in particular, there's something about the tactile experience of having been through different market cycles that you just can't read about. You kind of have to have lived it. And so people who have really been active in the space for a while, I think have such a valuable perspective. And I include you in that. And I thank you for being such a valuable resource to me since we met, I think 3 or 4 years ago now. Um, but what I'm really keen to talk to you about is your work in the regulation and is it fair for me to use the word lobbying space?
It's always a sensitive word in Singapore, but now it's looking back in hindsight, we can see it as
It
like
is
that.
it is there another word that you prefer?
Mm, I would think really just at the beginning was just to get them informed on what's going on, and then for them to validate their own direction on where crypto is.
And
Because
who's them? Who's the them you're speaking about
the
here?
Monetary Authority of Singapore.
Yep.
So the MES is very, very uh, uh, like at the front in terms of the fintech and crypto trend. They were doing their own research. They're only one of the regulators that actually buy different blockchain analytics softwares to actually do in-house research.
Hmm.
So a lot of the times they were learning by themselves. They were going down to grassroots to talk to us, talk to the different startups, and yeah, and making sure that they are going what they are learning is validated from ground up. It wasn't as much of a sense of lobbying. Lobbying usually happens when there is a certain motive for a particular group to do something. We
Hmm.
were just making sure that the industry can survive because there were so many different countries that were trying to ban the industry.
Yes.
We were trying to tell the regulators that you don't need to ban. We just need the right regulation. This whole industry can continue to thrive. That
Yeah.
was really the main message for the association that we were I was running.
Could we say advocacy? Would you be,
Yes, it would be
yeah.
better.
So, okay. So what was the trigger for you to say you're an entrepreneur working in the space? And from what I'm hearing, it sounded like at some point you said, you know what? There is significant regulatory risk and regulatory confusion here. Someone has to step up and be sort of an advocate for the industry interfacing with the regulators and MAS in particular. What was the like moment of clarity where you said, if not me, who?
So it was quite clear when I my startup had the bank accounts being shut down that even for myself, I needed to fix this somehow. So I wasn't, in a way, at the very beginning doing it for others because there was an opportunity when the association was created by a few of us entrepreneurs, or we were all facing the same thing, where we have very unsteady bank accounts, and we can't really blame us per se because when you apply for a company in Singapore back then, there was no classification for crypto, right? A lot of us have to write consultancy, IT development, and then when the banks do the random checks and they find out that the behavior of the transactions were not linked, then obviously your bank account will get hit. Right? And once your bank account gets hit, the banks will then put you onto the gray list. And it's a long time that you won't have a bank account. Especially in Singapore, you only have a few big banks. If one bank already closed your bank down, then you're counting only a few more left. Then for my own startup, I needed to do something, and that was the time that with a few other um, um, member startups that were also joining the cause, I then just stepped up and say, hey, I also want to help control the narrative. I want to become the chair. So it's more for myself, and the others were also all doing the same thing. It didn't become that altruistic to help the industry until later on, to the point where 2017 was a very major turning point. The article is still on the internet. Was when CoinHackle had their bank account shut down.
Hmm.
I already had mine for my startup, and then we made some a noise on LinkedIn, and then it became an article. And I think MES read that they were trying to push the fintech scene, but at the same time, the banks were not working together to help. And MES always had the stance that it's up to the banks to decide whether they want to keep your account or not. It's not like Europe
Hmm.
where it's a right to have a bank account. There's no such thing here in Singapore. So from then on, I needed to rally everyone to come together. Like it was basically the next step to do things
Yeah.
rather than, oh, I think I need to be the one to save everyone. It actually never was like that.
Yeah. I think I greatly admire, and I think most people would say about you is there's a selflessness in the way that you do this that I think people really appreciate, Anson. So I want to share that with you. I don't know how often people tell you that, but you deserve
Yes.
you deserve to hear it. Um, Maybe for the benefit of our audience, especially those that might be like a little bit newer to crypto, take us back to where we were as an industry in 2019. And in particular, what do you think the perception of crypto may have been around that time that is different from today and that may have like the banks all of a sudden starting to shut people's accounts down?
Yeah. So all the way up to 2019, banks really started waking up around 2016, when maybe the exchanges, the volumes were starting to grow. 2014 and 15, they weren't really woken up yet per se. They were still learning what crypto was, um, and then to the point where the volumes were growing. There was no regulation for per se back then. The banks really are starting to check on accounts to see who was dealing in crypto. I won't name which bank. Even my
Mm-hmm.
personal account was also shut down of some
Mm-hmm.
irregular activity back then. And it was just literally just buying Bitcoin from one of the exchanges. So obviously now things are different. You can buy crypto from an exchange, from a licensed exchange. The banks are fine with you. Back then, if you even write that you're dealing in crypto or Bitcoin in the messages, your bank account would have been in trouble back then.
You're done, yeah.
Yeah. So things changed in 2019, as you rightly said, was when FATF, Financial Action Task Force, which was the global AML body, anti-money laundering body, announced in June that all virtual asset service providers would need to, all member countries that have virtual asset service providers will need to come up with a registration and or licensing regime.
Mm-hmm.
And back then, it was the biggest change because prior to the June 2019, I already knew of this thing coming. So we were talking to different service providers back then and talked to them about this thing called travel rule. Everyone was laughing. Like, what is
Yeah.
this? What travel rule? Okay, there is
Yeah,
no
yeah,
no
yeah.
Swift, no nothing. I had some of our founders, other co-founders of other companies working with me on this thing, knowing that FedEx is going to come down with this. Went over to New York in consensus. The companies there was also laughing. So I knew that something is not right. There's a gap here. I know from the regulators that this is coming, but the companies don't know. And if we don't fix this, something will go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Why I thought that was because when I talked to the regulators, it was very clear that they think that the crypto community was very decentralized. No one trusts anyone. They thought that no one would come together. That was the narrative back then. So
Mm-hmm.
when the FATF meeting finished in 2019, when I was invited there to sit in Vienna, a few of us, heads of associations, came together and said, we need to prove to the regulators that everyone was willing to come together.
Mm-hmm.
That was when with a few of the other association heads, created IDAXA, International Digital Asset Association. This was where we felt we needed an association of associations because Access, as the local association, which is I would say, the oldest crypto association in Singapore, if we want to talk about things in the international space, it doesn't work because we are one local association. We needed an international one that groups everyone into a single voice. So that was when with a few of them, created IDAXA and used that as a platform to talk to FATF, and at the same time created the V20 Summit in 2019 in Osaka. That was one of the craziest times ever. we took 6 weeks only to create an international event and brought in all the largest service providers, including some of the big four, to be there and have FATF speak at the event as well. So to show them that the industry can come together to create standards that can fulfill regulation. So regulation that a guidance that they put out. And they were, well, at least from what I saw, was quite impressed that the industry can come together. From there, we also created with other associations and nonprofits the IVMS 101, which is the inter-VASP messaging system. So this was basically the first task to unite the ecosystem on what messages to send to fulfill the travel rule. But now this IBMS is being handled by our good friends at the GBBC, Global Blockchain Business Council, which the GDF, the Global Digital Finance nonprofit, is taking care of. So yeah, a lot of things happen, and from then on, when many regulators know that when if there is a need to unite the ecosystem can come together no matter how decentralized it is.
Yeah. Okay. Anson, I wanna rewind for a second because we're using a lot of acronyms at this point, and I want this to be accessible for a lot of people. And I know even so I think my main listener at this point is actually crypto people in Singapore. That's kind of how I think I think that's where most of my views are coming from right now. And that reminds me, guys, I need you to comment on these posts, okay? So you got to like, subscribe, and comment. I need to know who you are. I've been pleased with the amount of views I've been getting so far, but I need to know more about you guys. So please comment on this video or however you're viewing this. But and I know even among this group of people working in crypto, a lot of people might be working in the marketing department or in financial operations, and they don't know what FATF is because that's not part of the business that they touch. So first of all, what is FATF?
Great question. So even when I first heard about that term, I did not even know what FATF was myself. So when MAS asked me to go to that meeting, I was like, well, what is this? What is this FATF thing? Why does it have to start with FAT? I literally was thinking that way. So, and then I looked up and like, oh, wow, this is the big brother of anti-money laundering. Why is this the big brother? Because member countries, every couple of years or so, will need to submit what they call a mutual evaluation, which means every country that is member of this FATF organization will need to show that they are clean per se in terms of anti-money laundering. And then if they are not clean, they will be put into a gray list, and then all sorts of consequences can happen. Like for example, if a particular country goes to a gray list, service providers will need to treat all the clients from that particular country as a higher risk customer. And when you're treated as a high risk customer, a lot more monitoring goes on you.
Yeah.
Right. So a lot of countries have fallen into the gray list. Some came back out, such as UAE went into the gray list and came back out. I know there are many others right now that are still in. And then when they try to do financial transactions, it actually becomes fairly difficult. So Financial Action Task Force they will tell you it's non-binding. But when you do fall into the non-binding gray list, you will have a lot of trouble in terms of dealing with financial transactions. So they actually have a very large say.
So let me take a crack at a concise definition. So FATF, Financial Action Task Force, is this sort of like quasi-governmental regulatory group that connects the regulators of different countries and gives them a sort of a rating in a sense of whether they're like considered high risk, low risk, medium risk jurisdictions. And like a lot of like sort of NGO international type organizations, they don't have any kind of like direct authority, but they have a lot of implicit power because if a jurisdiction gets labeled as a high or low risk or medium risk jurisdiction, it changes the way that international business happens, and it has like really big consequences with big financial. We're talking about potentially very very large amounts of money.
Yes.
So all of these countries, all of these regulations, they want to have the highest possible status with FATF because it just makes it easier to do business, particularly a country like Singapore that relies so heavily as a financial hub. There's just no chance Singapore will ever do anything to compromise its status as like a tier one jurisdiction under FATF. Is that fair to say?
Yes, correct. Yes, and falling into the gray list or a high risk list per se, it's very hard to come out. You have to do so much to prove to the member jurisdictions that to FATF that you are becoming clean, you are cooperating, and coming back out. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay, and I think this is important for people to understand because I think we have a tendency in this industry to not always kind of fairly want to see the other side, the other point. And I'm always a fan of like, hey, we got to be able to see the other side of it as well, right? So you can understand a little bit the pressure that the regulators are under
yes.
to to have very high standards. Okay, the next acronym we use is VASP. What is a VASP? What is it? First of all, what does it stand for?
Virtual asset service provider. Basically, any crypto exchange, any sort of third party you're using that transacts in crypto. That's the acronym that FATF uses, VASP.
So via a VASP, would you say a VASP is essentially any crypto firm? Like that's how they FATF designates a crypto business.
So it sort of keeps okay. So I get where you're going towards. So basically, we have many different types of VASP right now. One is exchanges are the easiest ones. Someone that is in the middle to
Mm-hmm.
serve you, to give you the crypto services or crypto to fiat services that you want. Those are all VASPs, as long as there's
Mm.
a human in between. Now, there are services in DeFi where they do want to also classify them as VASPs. But the problem is um, there's a lot of DeFi, decentralized finance out there. I'm pretty sure the crypto people would know this.
Sure, yeah.
That
I think we don't have to, yeah.
that a lot of them, there is no middleman out there on the service. So uh, what the FATF at least are trying to do is that all the centralized VAS, where there's a real person exchange like OKX, service provider like CoinHackle, at least those ones get them regulated first.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then it's still taking a lot of work just to get this group of service providers under the regulation.
Yeah. Okay. And the last one that I want to talk about is we brought up the travel rule. Um, Maybe we can just expand on that a little bit. Just give people a general idea of what is the travel rule.
So the travel rule, the intent, I think it's very important, is that the intent of the travel rule is to make sure transactions are what FATF wants, transparent and fast. Unfortunately, when it's too transparent, there's a trade-off, right? Because when it's not transparent, it can be slow, but if it's too transparent, it may intrude privacy as well. So that's the intent. What travel rule is trying to make sure that the service providers, customers on each side, if for example, exchange A is serving a particular customer, this customer's information must be sent to the other side, to another
Mm,
exchange that they are trying to send to. And then both of these service providers exchange the information of the person that's sending the money and the person that's receiving the money. That's what they're intending to do. Because in the banking world, we have something called SWIFT, where when you send through international transactions, we can call this a gatekeeper that makes sure all different transactions, the information is being sent
Mm-hmm.
from one way and then to
The
the other.
the identifying information,
Correct.
essentially,
Identifying
right?
information,
Yeah.
correct. Yes. And they want that, the regulators want that for crypto.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with that is the assumption for the travel rule is that the whole industry trusts one another. And without doing that, you cannot send out transactions.
Mm-hmm.
This is unfortunately very different from crypto because you can send transactions without knowing who that person is you're sending to, and that person that is receiving the crypto may not even know who is sending them the crypto. And inherently, this is what's happening in crypto, and it is how it works is that you can just send peer to peer.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is where the trouble is because if you want to implement the travel rule like you do in banks, you are asking every single VASP, virtual asset service provider, to comply. Okay, but it is actually not easy because in Singapore, if I comply with another exchange in Singapore, that's fine, that's easy. What if I am as a service provider in Singapore trying to send to a beneficiary in Kenya or in
Mm-hmm.
Nigeria, or even for that matter in Congo? Would I want to actually share the information with them? This is what we call another term, sunrise issue, where the regulations are not clear and not all regulators know how to regulate the
Mm.
crypto space. And we are still facing that today. Although it's better than 5 years ago, but we're still facing that. So travel is just to answer your question, it's just trying to make the transactions transparent, but at the same time, it goes against some of the ethos of what crypto is about.
Yeah. And I think it might be helpful. I wonder, I don't know that everyone understands what a big deal the travel rule is, honestly. Because there's two ways to look at it, I think. One is that, well, look, you say this is kind of how it works in the traditional banking system anyway, so it shouldn't be a big deal for crypto to have similar compliance. And in fact, you could take it further and say it really becomes almost impossible to have the kind of traditional anti-money laundering and prevention of criminals moving money or terrorists moving money or um sanctioned, enforcement. There's a lot of that type of stuff that becomes really, really difficult to achieve under crypto without something like the travel rule. But on the other side of it, um, I think most people in crypto feel like, yeah, but this is the whole point is that we wanted it to be truly peer to peer, and we want to change the way that people are able to exchange value. Um, this is a very, very contentious debate, and I do think that there are good points on each side. Of course, you have this sort of like extremely libertarian, almost anarchist camp of people who think everyone should be able to do anything all the time. You have people who are obviously much, much more want to see much, much more restriction. And then most people who know more about the subject will kind of have a tendency to fall in the middle. And I think where that middle is is where we're trying to find right now. But the travel rule is a really big deal. Most of the biggest exchanges are compliant with it currently. And it's basically, you really can't anonymously send crypto from an exchange anymore, right? So anyway, let's I think that's enough on that. But let's go back to, okay, so you started Access, which is the advocacy group that you founded, the first such group in Singapore interacting with MAS to sort of communicate the interests of the growing crypto industry in Singapore with the government, and hopefully be able to get some kind of like fair cooperation. How did you find the receptiveness of the MAS to your ideas at that time?
So when we first had the meeting back in 2014 with MES, my late mentor told me one thing. He said, Anson, your mission when meeting with MES is to be able to have the next meeting.
Mm,
This was key. What he was trying to say is, you're not here to pitch everything to MAS on the first meeting because one, they are the government, they will be skeptical. Key is to make sure that they will have the interest on what you're saying, that they will want a second meeting. So with this advice, I've been going everywhere when I talk to regulators, when it's talking to a particular regulator for the first time, that I'll make sure that I can get a second meeting. I
mhm,
digress a bit, but going back to MAS, it wasn't that receptive. The people that were in the first meeting, actually, some of them already went to the private sector. So maybe they were already receptive at the beginning, but didn't show on their faces. But it was very clear to me that they wanted to see more members in access before getting serious with the conversations.
mm,
And it validated to me when I was also the co-founder of Singapore FinTech Association that you have to reach a certain member threshold that they will see the seriousness in you.
mhm.
Uh, yeah, so it was only after until a year or later when we have over 100 members that we started coming to the table, updating each other on where it is. And we are very eager to do every consultation paper respond to every consultation paper that MES came up with, and using every paper to update them. Where is access? How many members do we have? What are the sort of feedback that we're receiving on top of the consultation papers? So it took a few years overall.
Okay. Maybe tell let's so I'm interested in sticking with this sort of like 2019, 2020 time period a little bit because this is when I first got into crypto in Singapore. And I remember that there was, first of all, this was a growth period. We were sort of coming out of a bear market at this point, and there was like quite a bit of optimism. And I remember, do I have my timing right on that?
Yes, 2018 was right at the top of the ICO period, and then yeah, then the market started crashing down. Yes,
In 2018.
in 2018 and then 2020 when got locked down into COVID and
That's
things
when
started
things
getting
started
crazy again. Yeah,
to go up. Okay.
yeah.
So I want to say like, okay, maybe it was 2019 then, but there was a period there where I remember there was a lot in the news about Singapore wanting to be a hub for crypto. And there was this idea, and we all know when the Singapore government puts their mind to something, they can do it. And there was this perception that Singapore was really staking its claim as wanting to be a global center for crypto businesses. Um, and that didn't quite work out. What happened there?
Okay, so it's also to be honest, when I heard about this at the beginning, I didn't hear it from the horse's mouth that they said that they want to be the hub. This whole news came from bottom up. I also saw that, but it was very clear in terms of the intentions, trying to attract the different companies to come here that they sort of are going that way.
Hmm.
However, I think what happened back then was they licensed a few of the companies early, and some of them just also got pulled down by the crash. And then it was at one parliamentary session when our current PM, Lawrence Wong, this is my own speculation, how I saw where things really changed, was when Prime Minister Lawrence Wong said, we just want to be a responsible hub. That
Mm,
was basically saying not to have the aspiration to be the hub back then. I think it
hmm.
was a lot of the companies that got the license and end up crashing down and
Are
it's
you
sort
are,
of yeah.
are you talking about Huddle Knot?
One of them, yeah, one of them, yes,
Yeah, because that came a bit later.
yes.
That was Huddle Knot was 2022,
2022, yes.
I
But they got the
think.
license quite early
Early.
as
Yeah,
well, yeah,
yeah. But
yeah.
so by the time MAS started giving licenses, I think there was already the perception, maybe because of how few licenses they were giving out, there was the perception that maybe Singapore wasn't really as enthusiastic about becoming a crypto hub as they had sort of initially. And maybe to your point, it wasn't them who had been communicating that message so much as other people like hope, being optimistic. Is
Yes,
that
yes. Yeah, so I think also what happened was I think every new licensing regime will go through the similar phase, and that is the government or the regulator works so hard on the actual licensing regime. So for
mm,
Singapore, it would be the payment services license under the Payment Services Act. We actually worked with MAS since 2018 on this. They asked us to ask the association to work on the code of practice, which eventually now many of the rules that appears in PSN 02, which is the crypto law per se that the companies need to fulfill when they get their license, came out from there. Um, so we worked since then, and then when you put so much effort in, they were also anxious that to make sure anxious were to see if there were actually any companies going to take up this license. I remember there was a period that they were worried that no one
mm.
is going to apply. They did not expect suddenly six odd hundred companies wanting to go on the exemption list. I think there were actually more. I forgot the exact number, but don't quote me on that. I know it's a very high number.
I had
Uh,
heard a similar, yeah. It was
yeah,
so over
and
500. Yeah.
yes, and then so many apply, which also means you need a lot more officers to look at the different applications. So they did not expect that. So I can understand why that message came out saying wanting to be the crypto hub, because somehow they still want to make sure that there are people applying for the license. Maybe it's not linked, but maybe it came from that because even in the new licensing regime that they're going to come out with for the stablecoins later on, the same anxiousness happens. They're worried that a licensing regime that comes up, it may flop. It's actually a two-way street. People think that
Mm,
it's a one way, but regulators themselves also want to make sure that there is a pickup for that license.
mm. That's interesting perspective. I wouldn't, well, I guess um it should be it's certainly unsurprising to us in the industry that so many people would want to be licensed in Singapore, right? I mean, it's such a great and jurisdiction to be licensed in. Um, yeah, okay. And where does that take us to today? We do have a number. I think we're up to like, is it 20 over 20?
Last I saw was 24, 25, 24. Yeah.
Yeah, licensed firms in Singapore, which is good. Um,
Licensed crypto firms in Singapore, yes.
yeah. Without digging too deep into it, I want to mention that we should be clear that the licenses that these firms have isn't exactly kind of the license that they need. Is that fair to say as well? It's sort of like most of them they have a payments license, correct?
Yes.
It's not exactly the same as like it's not like a crypto business license, which I think is a lot of people's perception.
Oh, yeah. So yes, so for MAS, the intent is for payments. That's the intent for this whole license. But as like you said, a lot of them are exchanges, some are in custody. So within the DPT category, there are also subcategories as well. So it does take time. Like they don't want to at the beginning go and create the different subcategories and then no one
Sure.
fits in. So not all are payments. So many of the companies, as the compliance officers, even the CEOs, do constantly meet with MAS and tell them what troubles they're having. So for example, you may have payment rules, but you're a custody, but it doesn't apply. Then how do we go about this? Or if you're a payments firm, you're not really in custody, that also doesn't apply, but you have custody rules or segregation rules. How does that work? So all these things are still going on. So all the licensed firms are actually always in contact with MAS to tell them about their challenges. MAS is not really here saying that, okay, we have a license. Yes, it's important. You must fulfill everything. But they're also here to listen, to see where
Yeah.
your challenges are. Yeah. But they all obviously, if you are trying to say something just to make it looser for the sake of your business, they will also find out as well. They can hear the difference.
Yeah, I just think it's helpful for people to understand how sort of imperfect and um in progress this whole licensing, kind of regime for crypto firms is. Okay, let's take that to where we are today. Um we have I think fairly a sophisticated licensing kind of regime coming out in Europe. And then we have, the potential for licensing, crypto licensing coming out of the United States as well, which is obviously kind of the biggest and most influential regime. What's your perception on what the crypto regulatory space looks like in the next couple years? What do you think are the opportunities that we have in that area for as an industry, and what do you think are some of the risks? How could things go wrong?
So, very good question. So in Europe, we have this one called markets. Even I always forget the name, but we call it the acronym MiCA, Markets in Crypto Assets Regulation. Yes. So this one is once you get for example, the electronic money institution license, you can then tell that particular jurisdiction, for example, if you're in France or if you're in Luxembourg, that you want to add on the MiCA license. Once you have the MiCA license approved, you can passport your services to all 27 European Union countries. So that is a very big deal because right now, even in Southeast Asia, yes, you have a ASEAN where we have all 10 countries, 10, 11 countries together, but there's no one uniform license where it can passport into different parts of all the 10, 11 countries. But MiCA, you can do it. So that's why many of the service providers, crypto service providers today are trying to get into MiCA. You see a lot going into France because it's actually quite uneven in that region as well. But it will be enacted and into law and must be abided by on the 1st of January 2025. So for me, going forward, I think once you have the MiCA license, Europe, there will be a lot of opportunities there. It's going to be huge. As for the US, as we know, President Trump is very unpredictable. May say something, but then may do something else. But when we analyze the actions and the amount of lobby money to see where the originators are coming from, a lot of money actually came from the crypto block, as Perry Boring from the president, a CEO of a digital chamber in Washington would say, right? A lot of them are actually pro crypto. So would Donald Trump suddenly change the stance? He may, yes, but there will be a lot of people within the House and Senate trying to push for the right regulation, especially
It
now.
it looks good at the moment. I think that's
Yes,
fair to say, right? Early signs look good. Bessent as Treasury Secretary, he's pro crypto as far as we know. One thing that Arthur actually talks about, and it's good to remind people, is that we all thought Gary Gensler was pro crypto,
exactly,
right in the
exactly.
beginning. So we can't be too naive going into this. But that said, I think a lot of people feel like things kind of look good at the moment. It feels like things are shaping up to the U.S. taking a big shift. But please continue.
Yes, so I think the difference between 2016 and now, it was when you look at all the guys in the US, the pro crypto people that are helping out to I will call it shape the regulations. It's much more, um, they've learned from the lessons of just putting Gary Gensler in, just relying on
Mm,
that one person. Right now, you see so many different people from so many different states trying to push the regulation. So if there's one person that is not agreeable to this, you still have a whole other group trying to push it. So there's a lot more, like it's a bigger army within the political scene in US compared to
hmm
2016. But like you said, we never know what changes there are, but it does look positive right now.
Yeah. And I do think like it's interesting that crypto did get to the point where they realized like, hey man, we've got to get active politically. And some could say I think they were a bit late. We were a bit late. And I'll say they because I wasn't involved in crypto at the time. And this was one of the first things for me that I recognize. And I don't think I'm saying too much by saying this, but like I saw it kind of in I really saw it in person working at BitMEX because I started working for Arthur Hayes, who kind of comes from, I think, a bit more of that libertarian crypto ethos. You know, he started BitMEX in 2014 in those early days where they really saw themselves as quite being quite in opposition to governments. And then he resigned, and I worked for Alexander Hopner from the traditional markets that who became CEO of BitMEX, and immediately recognized the importance of interfacing with governments and with regulators, and that seems to be where the industry is kind of moving, and yeah, I think we could have potentially avoided a lot of problems as an industry if we had sort of like taken a different tack to that earlier. But people have their principles and I get that as well. Um, cool, man. What
Oh
else
yeah, so
can
just want to add that basically the train for crypto regulation is moving and it doesn't stop. What does that mean? Especially now in the US, the narrative for the Bitcoin reserve is not just in the US, it's global now.
hmm
You have Brazil planning to use 5% of its reserves to buy Bitcoin. El Salvador is
mm,
doing quite well. You have Argentina also doing the same. So, and then companies are having it as a treasury. So it's now a sort of a land grab moment for
mm,
crypto. So if, in a way, if US does not work on this, everyone
mm,
grabs the narrative for the Bitcoin reserves, then it will really be too late. So the train is now here. Now it's just to see
mhm.
how to capture this opportunity.
Yeah, and I think one of the easiest ways to capture it at the moment is just to buy Bitcoin because if this happens, you know, right now we're like, oh wow, you know, 95, when are we going to hit 100? I think there's almost it's hard to calculate how high the price will go and how fast if globally governments say that we're going to start holding 5% of our reserves in Bitcoin. Like if you do not own Bitcoin at that time, you are going to be crying your eyes out. So
Yes,
I
I
think,
really hope as well. I hope this message goes out that Singapore is doing something about it as well. Because as a financial center, even as Switzerland, they're already buying up MicroStrategy as well as part of their
mm,
portfolio. So there is some exposure to Bitcoin. So I hope that if any regulators in Singapore seeing this or any of the government, I think Singapore should also consider soon as well.
that would be great. Well, if there's anyone that can help encourage them to do that, it's going to be you, Anson.
We'll try my best.
Anson, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you so much for fighting the good fight for so long and everything that you do for the crypto community globally and for Singapore.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me.
All right, great. See you soon.